Hello, BookTube. I'm Shawn the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. I am here again with Ros of Scallydandling about the books, and we are here to talk about British women novelists. We may go farther afield than that, but that's how we're going to start the discussion. Welcome back to my channel, Ros. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. I've got my cup of coffee and I'm raring to go about these lovely women.
Given the time difference, I have my first glass of wine of the evening, so let's see how that goes, shall we?
I was recording a tag yesterday, Shawn, and I especially made sure that I went and got a gin and tonic so I could do tipsy tagging like you. And then I got so busy talking, I forgot to drink it.
That's never happened to me.
I know.
So this discussion was prompted by a lovely comment that Ros left on one of my videos. And that video was my review of an Elizabeth Bowen novel. Was it The Last September? That's the title, right? The Last September. Yeah. And this is what, I'll put it right up on the screen here. Ros wrote, "I have a special delight in 20th century English women novelists who write with subtle care." To which I replied, because Ros and I had been discussing doing a Zoom chat at some point, and I said, now there's a topic for a Zoom chat if ever I heard one. So that's what brings us together today. So why don't we start with Elizabeth Bowen?
Oh, yes. What a pleasure. I wrote down a few of the women that came to mind when we were thinking about this topic and when they were all born. And it feels like there was a really kind of rich, fruitful kind of what was in the water in the British Isles at that point that brought out all these amazing women writers,
yes.
You know, and we can talk about loads of them, but Elizabeth Bowen is one of my absolute favourites. She was born in 1899, and it's like that kind of turn of the, you know, very end of the 19th, very beginning of the 20th century. It was like, yeah, there was a whole crop, shall we say. But she is just such a wonderful stylist.
Oh,
Isn't she?
Stylist is the perfect word. Her prose, I mean, it's every so often in The Last September, I thought, you know, that probably could have been said more simply, but that was like about 4 sentences in the whole novel, and the rest of it, it was just like, oh my God, just gorgeous prose.
And the thing with her prose, and this is the thing I suppose I was saying about the subtlety, these women, and she's a good example, you know, people think of them as writing about small topics. Do you know what I mean? Like writing about relationships and marriages and, you know, and actually there's so much more depth than that. But it's because it's written by a woman, it's like, oh, it's domestic, but it's not. There's layers of ideas in all her books. It's not in your face. You have to look for it. And when you look for it, you see more and more and more.
The Last September was really subtle in the way that it represented the time of troubles and
absolutely
of that and stuff that I missed until I read the introduction after I read the book, and it bumped my reading experience up to 5 stars because I didn't catch all of that when I was reading. Just fabulous.
Yeah, it's these nuances of like class and nationality or identity in there, and it's there in the dialogue and just like little words, and yeah, it could pass you by if you weren't paying attention. Great. I've got another of her books here, Heat of the Day, and this is in wartime London.
So that's the one some of my subscribers commented that it's even better than The Last September. Do you agree?
Yeah, I would agree. This is I picked this one up because I think this is probably my favourite of hers. She writes very honestly about relationships, I suppose, and in a very unhidebound way. I mean, that's one of my joys about actually these women writers of the 20th century, because they're all fairly sort of posh, you know, and educated, and you kind of expect them to be very conventional, and absolutely they are not.
I almost fell out of my chair when I found out that who wrote The Magnificent Spinster?
Oh, no. You see, I can never remember things when you ask me, you know.
The name is on the tip of my tongue. May Sarton.
Yes.
Did you know that Elizabeth Bowen and May Sarton were lovers for a time?
I did, yeah. Yeah, I mean, she had a number of interesting affairs in her life. I think she also had a relationship with the poet Cecil Day-Lewis.
That could be true. I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, no, I'm May Sarton. Yeah, absolutely. That kind of, it feeds through into the books, doesn't it? The pleasure of this one is that it's that thing when you think you know someone and maybe you don't, because her lover's he's suspected of being a spy, you know, like selling information, and it's in the war, and it's almost like she becomes a pawn in that. Yeah, I would really recommend it. Definitely a Shawn book. I'm sure it's a Shawn book. You won't bail on this one.
I have two to show you. This one,
Ooh.
Friends and Relations. Oh,
Yes, and I haven't read that one.
I believe it is just before or just after the last.
Mm-hmm.
I can't. I looked it up when I did my book haul video, and I've already forgotten. It's got that glossy
Mm-hmm.
cover. I think it's a publishing on demand book. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, if you haven't read it, I might hit you up for a buddy read at some point.
Oh yeah, rather. The Death of the Heart is another favorite of mine.
Okay, I think it's The Death of the Heart that some of my commenters have said was even better than September. And I also recently got this baby, Collected Stories.
Oh.
In the
now that
library edition.
Oh, nice edition. Oh, very classy.
Chunky.
Do you know what though? I know you really read and appreciate short stories, don't you? And for some reason, I think that I don't really like short stories.
Well, lots of people don't.
When I read them, I enjoy them, but there's something in my head. I have this prejudice against short stories. You know, I think, oh no, I want a whole novel's worth.
Well, with Bowen, there's quite a few novels to choose from too.
There are. And her Anglo-Irish background is really interesting. And that gives, I think, that slightly alternative political or social kind of viewpoint that she has.
Very much came through in the last September, and like I say, some of the nuances I missed until I read the introduction, but it was just layers and layers of nuance.
There are a few interesting Elizabeths. I'm going to throw another Elizabeth at you, okay, which is Elizabeth Taylor. Have you read any Elizabeth Taylor?
I have.
I should have known you would have done.
I have had mixed results with Elizabeth Taylor, but her last novel, her most famous novel, Mrs. Palfrey at the Claremont. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. Mel and I buddy read it together. We have a buddy read review that I will link to in the show notes below. I loved it so much.
Because if you had said that you didn't like that, I would have actually cried. In fact, I might have just like stormed off and refused to talk any further.
Oh no, it's just gorgeous. I loved it. It was really emotionally powerful and again, very subtle.
And that is it, because it appears to be about these kind of like, you know, middle-aged woman and like quirky characters and so on. And actually it's about English society and war and it's got all those themes in and it's funny, you know, and why shouldn't you be funny as well? Elizabeth Taylor, people at the time compared to Jane Austen, I think she's really, really underrated as a writer, maybe even more so than Bowen. I think she's underappreciated. The one I've got to sort of wave at you is A Game of Hide and Seek. And don't you love the photo on that?
I have the exact same edition of that book unread on my shelf. I have not tried that one yet.
Oh, it's a falling in love book, and then like time passes and you go, it's like a character that is terribly respectable but isn't really underneath inside. She does female sexuality well, I think, Elizabeth Taylor.
Now, the ones I had bad luck with was A View of the Harbour.
I haven't read that one. Was that not good?
Well, the thing that bothered me the most was there was a male character, a retired captain, that kept in a really aggressive way insinuating himself into all the lives of all of the people of the village. He was just visiting, and I couldn't stand him. He irritated me so much. I had to bail. I couldn't finish. Bertram. His name was Bertram. I get all worked up just thinking about Bertram in The View of the Harbour. So that was a bail.
You look pink. Yeah, it's turned you pink just thinking about him.
It's not just the wine. And the other one that I did finish but didn't like very much. Let me see here.
Oh.
And it made me a little bit shy to try more by her.
Not Angel, I hope.
No, but I've heard Angel's good. I've heard Angel's good.
Angel is good. Yeah, Angel is excellent.
At Mrs. Lippincote's.
Well, you know, that was her first book.
Oh, it was?
Yeah, I think so.
I'm glad to hear that. I gave it 2 stars.
Oh, my goodness, that's harsh. But I think...
Shawn the Book Maniac, harsh?
It was... But Yeah, I think it's got some of those first novel faults. Yeah.
I'm very forgiving knowing that. Yes.
Yeah.
So Angel.
Yeah.
Angel's supposed to be really good.
Yes. So
Hide
I'd
and Seek.
say Hide and Seek and Angel. Yeah.
Okay.
There was another one that was in my mind, but no, forget that. Yeah. It's so good that you can edit. You know, when I make my videos, I don't edit because I'm a very, very lazy person.
I'm going to leave that comment in because I want my rebuttal to go in, which is that you don't need to edit because you are an extremely articulate person. If I was as articulate as you, I wouldn't be editing.
But I'm glad you are today because I'm going to keep forgetting things.
You and me both. So yes, Elizabeth Taylor, and she was friends with Barbara Pym.
She was, yes. Who I know is an enthusiasm of yours and someone that I also really love. And she, again, she has that humor but insight thing, doesn't she, that I really enjoy.
Yes, and I don't want to, because you like her and my subscribers are probably sick of hearing me talk about her, so I'll just say in passing that some readers enjoy her for the humor, and that's great. She is a very funny writer. Usually most of her books have a very predominant comic tone, but all of her books I also sense very palpably an undertow of loneliness and yearning for some kind of a connection. It doesn't necessarily have to be with a romantic partner, but that I find is the profundity of Barbara Pym, that it's not just a comedy, her stuff.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I don't tend to read things that are just funny, if you know what I mean. You could be witty and slightly satirical and all those things, but yeah, there isn't that undertow of real emotion. She's just very insightful about human beings, isn't she?
And she credits, and other scholars or biographers say that she was influenced by, what's her name, with scary hairdo.
Scary hairdo? You mean like me? Yeah.
No. Very ferociously kind of. She's got a double surname. She wrote very really hard to understand novels. Ivy Compton Burnett.
Oh yes.
Ivy Compton. Yes. You know what I mean about the hair, right?
Yes, I do now. Yes.
Just so people don't think I'm being totally sexist pig, I'm going to put a couple photos to back up my description.
No, scary hairdo. No, yeah, no, I'm totally with you. Yeah, she is a scary hairdo lady. Yes.
So, what do you think of her?
She's never won my heart, if I'm honest. I can see the value and I can see the influences that she created, but she's not someone who's sort of struck that chord for me. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I tried one. I couldn't finish it.
Oh, right. Okay.
It was Men and Wives, so I don't think it's one of her famous ones. I will try something else. The number of times that Barbara Pym herself has talked about the influence, I want to get it more. So can you recommend one that's one of her?
No, there isn't one that I'd say, I'll read that and that'll, no. It's because she doesn't engender that. You know, some people, you talk about and my eyes light up and I become all kind of, whereas she was more of a chore.
Oh, just chore is the perfect word. The way that the characters spoke to one another, and it was just kind of like it was coming through water. I couldn't get a handle on what was going on or what they were talking about.
Some of these people, I think they were like friends and they admired each other and they talk up each other's work, but that doesn't necessarily mean that or they had lovers in common. Or
I think I have to ask a very rhetorical question. Do you think that Ivy Compton Burnett had friends? Maybe she did. She was fascinating. I would rather read a biography of her than another of her novels. I'm curious about her. So
we'll leave Ivy.
We'll move on from Poison Ivy. I wonder, do you think she had that nickname? I better not have another glass of wine here. So who else warms your heart?
Thinking of double-barreled surnames, Sylvia Townsend Warner. She's another of these underrated English women writers that I really rate. I've only read 2 of her books so far, but they've both been 5-star reads, and they were at kind of different ends of her writing career. But Lolly Willowes is the one that I think it's become fashionable again.
Her most well thought of novel, I think.
Yeah.
I have not read it.
Oh, well, I would love you to read it, Shawn. I really would. She was a tremendously unconventional, that very conventional upbringing. And then somewhere around 1930, she set up home with another woman and which at the time, I suppose, was less usual. Yeah. Lolly Willowes is really interesting about, again, female identity and female sexuality. And it kind of goes off into this witchy thing, which sounds like it would be a turn-off, but it really isn't. It's about English society and the English village and outsiders and incomers, and it's a really, really satisfying book. Again, she has the prose. She has that prose style that I like, that subtle. I mean, I love modernists. I love Virginia Woolf, but I also really like people that don't, you know, like some writers are saying, look at me, look at what I'm doing, look how clever it is, you know. And I like the writers that say, barely, I don't want you to really think about my style while you're reading it. I want you to just glide past my prose and not notice how clever I am.
Yeah, lovely way to put it. The other one that you said there's two.
The second one is The Things They Carried, and it's a book about nuns, Shawn. Yeah, there's a whole thing about books about nuns. Yeah, I could go off on a few, actually.
I have read none of them so far.
Yeah, well,
I'm not in the habit of reading books about nuns.
This is like historical fiction, and she set out, I think, to write like a different style of historical fiction about this sort of medieval convent. And, you know, it's one of those books where it's almost like hard to put into words why it's so good, because it's almost like nothing happens and yet everything happens. Yeah.
That's fabulous. I have read one by her. I've read Summer Will Show.
And I haven't read that one. What did you think of that?
Well, I didn't think much of it in that I gave it 3 stars, but it's a novel that I did as a buddy read with Eric Carl Anderson and Britta Bowler about 2 years ago. And that novel has really stuck with me. So it was kind of like a brilliant failure.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Set in the 1848 revolution, and it starts with an aristocratic lady whose husband has gone over to Paris to be with his lover, and then she follows him after his children die of smallpox or something. And then the scene that I can't stop thinking about is, I think, the beginning of the 2nd section or something, where she finds her husband at his lover's house, and it's the eve of the outbreak of the 1848 revolution. And the lover, she becomes transfixed, and she and the lover end up becoming lovers. But this scene, she's just seeing the lover and her husband for the first time. And the lover is, now I've forgotten, is she telling a story or singing a narrative song? But just the way that scene is described, with the main character who's just arrived in Paris, and she's walking into the house that's full of people, and the way that this Jewish French woman is mesmerizing all the people in attendance with this. And again, I've kind of forgotten, is it a narrative song or a story? I forget. I can't stop thinking about that scene, and I want to actually reread the novel just to get more into that and get more out of it. The novel as a whole didn't quite work, but it was a fascinating failure.
She was always trying to innovate, is the impression I get with her. And if you innovate, sometimes not all of it works.
Yes.
She didn't want to just like write the same book again and again. You know how like writers now get kind of pushed into doing that because of the whole publishing world imperatives.
You commented on my Ursula Orange review. Ursula Orange, she's a middlebrow writer from the 1940s, but I really like her. And I've just picked up this one. I had to buy it. So this is the Furrowed Middlebrow imprint, is an imprint of Dean Street Press, and they are reprinting. It's kind of almost genre fiction, but it's women's fiction from the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s. And they put out several of these reprints a year, and this one is maybe the newest one. And the title alone, I just got it in the mail yesterday. The title alone made me have to buy it, and then the cover. Much Dither.
Oh, much dithering.
Much
Oh,
Dithering by
brilliant.
Dorothy Lambert. Isn't that fabulous? Look at that cover.
Yeah. And
Ah,
I do much dithering myself. I mean, yeah, that's superb.
this is an Irish one, actually. Dorothy
Yeah.
Lambert was born in 1884 in County Cork. She didn't start writing until she was 43, and between her first novel at that age and her death, she wrote 27 novels
Oh,
from the age of 43 until her death. So
wow.
much dithering. She didn't dither after she got started.
Yeah, no, she got on with it, didn't she?
Are you familiar with this new line of reprints by the British Library, Women Writers Series? They've just
Oh,
been
no, that's
published
nice.
this year, and this is Chatterton Square by E.H. Young. Do you know anything about this?
No, not a thing.
I don't either. So she was
That's
a
wrong.
prolific British novelist. She won the James Tait Prize in 1930.
Wow.
Her
And I
novel,
haven't even heard of her.
I hadn't either. Her novels often looked at social mores and unconventional households. So
Oh,
that might be a
sounds like
lost
one for
book.
you and me, doesn't it?
Well,
Yeah.
if we get started on buddy reads, our buddy reading marriage might last longer than your marriage to your husband,
Don't tell him.
as long as we stay in good health. And the next one is The Tree of Heaven by May Sinclair.
Oh, now May Sinclair, I have come across. When she was quite young, she went in the First World War and went with an ambulance.
Yes, and she was a suffragist.
And a suffragist. Really interesting woman. I love these women, I have to say.
And the last one on my pile is Molly Panther Downs from this same series, My Husband Simon.
No, I don't know her. Another one to look for.
I read a novella of her. I did a buddy read with Cousin of Always Doing, One Fine Day, which I didn't love, but I liked. And then this was by her as well. And this is just a small sampling of the books like that. And these are not maybe as literary as some of the ones we've been talking about. Let's finish up, Roz. I have a Rosamund Lehman. What's her name?
Rosamund Lehman. Are we going to talk about Rosamund Lehman?
Please, let's finish with that, because that's all we have time to do. So
because
do
I
an
was
elevator
gonna say,
pitch for Rosamund Lehman.
if there's one author that I have to get in here before we finish, it is Rosamund Lehman. And not just because she's a fellow Rosamund, you know, and there's not a lot of us about. Look, I pulled out a whole pile of her books for this. And talk about editions. They're all the Virago Classics with the green. Oh, I read my first Rosamund Lehman. Not this one. I read her first book, The Dusty Answer, when I was 18.
5 years ago.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, 5 years ago. At the beginning of the book, the protagonist is also 18, except that's somewhere in like the it would have been 1919 maybe. And it was like I identified totally with this girl that was written about in 1927 and was set in 1919. And Rosamund Lehman, I would put her along with Elizabeth Taylor and Elizabeth Bowen. She's that tier, if that makes sense. She was born in 1901 and died in 1990, so she kind of spans the 20th century. Some of her books kind of she wrote at intervals across her life. The Dusty Answer is, in some ways, it's like quite a conventional book because it's like a girl coming of age, falling in love, all of that, except that it's not conventional because she falls in love with both a man and a woman. But it's kind of subtle. I mean, at the time, it was just quite scandalous as a book in 1927, even though this is sort of unconsummated sort of lesbian relationship. It was quite out there. But again, it's the style that sucks me in because it's elegant and crisp and unfussy, but the intelligence behind it, Shawn.
Wonderful.
You know? Yeah. Read her.
I will. I have one of her books on my shelf, but I can't remember which one. So show us the other ones you've got, and maybe that'll jig my memory.
Okay, so there's Invitation to the Waltz, which is another of her early ones, kind of young women. The Ballad and the Source. Or The Weather in the Streets. Yeah. And then The Sea Grape Tea. This is probably my least favorite of hers. Yeah, The Weather in the Streets, it's a love story of a sort, is what the blurb says. And that is so true. She's great on relationships, but they're never straightforward. You know, this is like kind of post-failed marriage. There's always undercurrents, I guess, in all her books, probably because her own life was not straightforward. But so which is the one that you have?
None of those. So
The Echoing Grove, that's another beauty.
It might be The Echoing Grove.
I just happen not to have a copy of that anymore.
We briefly mentioned Ursula Orange. I just put my review of this. So I see
Yes.
that Ursula Orange's daughter is the
Yeah.
writer Gillian Tyndall.
Yes.
And Gillian Tyndall has a book about Rosamund Lehman. So there you go.
So everything comes round in a circle.
So, Ros, this is like literally the beginning of a infinite series of discussions I hope that we can have, because we have barely scratched the surface.
Oh, absolutely.
My wish list of buddy reads with you is as long as my arm. So, thank you.
I don't know if I dare embark on a buddy read with you, though, Shawn, because there's always the risk that you will bail.
These kind of books, it's very rare for me to bail. Very rare. This is my period. What a delight! Thank you so much. You'll come back, right?
Oh, of course so. I would love to. And those buddy reads are on.
I see here that Rosamund Lehman has a memoir, The Swan in the Evening, Fragments of an Inner Life. Do you know that one?
No, I haven't read her memoir. Do you know what? This is a guilty secret. I tend to avoid memoirs by writers that I really like. Because sometimes you read their memoir and you actually go off them as a person, and you've loved their books, and then you think, oh, I don't know. I like an autobiographical novel, but not a memoir.
I'm not a big fan of memoir, and that's an interesting twist to put on it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ros.
Pleasure. Thank you so much. This has been fun.
What a delight.